Like bold, has bold flavors, bright flavors, it's fresh, so you really can't find it anywhere else. Hi, I'm Ross Pangilinan. We're here at Remix Kitchen Bar in Long Beach, California. It's a reflection of my type of cuisine. You know, I'm French trained, Italian trained, but I grew up in Southern California. I'm Asian, so it's kind of everything into one space. I grew up skateboarding a lot. You want to have as many tricks in your arsenal as possible. When I am working, it's a challenge that I love. It's fun. It's like skateboarding. You know, when you're trying to learn a trick, you keep on trying that trick until you land it. You know, your skateboard style is unique, and so is your cooking style. Our albacore tostadas, we make an orange pepper in-house, and we crust the albacore with it, and we have a Japanese dressing that brings a lot of umami flavor bomb in your mouth. Next is the pork cheek adobo. That's a play on my grandma's recipe. We use Filipino vinegar, Filipino soy sauce, a lot of peppercorns, a lot of garlic when braising the pork cheek. We braise it until it's tender. It's one of our most popular brunch dishes. Our shrimp lumpia, we take shrimp, we take a lot of vegetables, a lot of herbs, mint, cilantro. We make that in the lumpia wrapper and we just roll it up and fry it off, and it's really good.
It's got a little of everything. I mean, it was just a good choice of foods put together.
You know, just this week we just noticed they brought on pizza. We didn't have pizza 2-3 weeks ago, so we love that the menu always changes too and get to try new stuff.
We're excited to be able to welcome people into our restaurant, and we like to, you know, kind of remix it up, if you will.
Johnny Cash was a great fan of Martin guitar. Willie Nelson, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Eric Clapton, of course, Ed Sheeran. It's a remarkable roster of artists that love Martin guitars. The craftsmanship is remarkable. Everybody here loves guitars, loves guitar music, and loves the idea that we're making something that makes life better. The business was founded by my great-great-great-grandfather in 1833. When he decided to get into the guitar building business, he set a very high bar for himself. I feel an obligation to make sure that every one of today's Martin guitars is as good as every Martin guitar that he made, and his son, and his son's son, and on down through the generations. There are hundreds of steps involved in making one Martin guitar. You want to make these parts as precisely as possible, but once you've got those parts and pieces, it's the human hand that does a fantastic job of putting them together. And we're really proud of it. We want you to see how a Martin guitar is made.
Here in our Nazareth factory, we have about 500 employees. There's a very specific formula that goes into building one of our guitars. The woods have to be a certain thickness, the braces have to be a certain thickness. Can't have the woods too thick or you're not going to get the sound you want out of it. We try to build the guitar to a point where it's almost so thin that it might implode on itself.
The wood is an integral part of not only the aesthetics, but the sound. Guitar builders, through a trial and error, discovered that exotic tropical hardwoods work really well if you want to make a really good sounding guitar that's beautiful and durable.
Right here we have a guitar where the body is made out of sinker mahogany. This wood has been immersed in streams in Belize for could be hundreds of years.
People can be skeptical. Are they still handmade? And then you get about halfway through the tour, people kind of go, yeah, they're still handmade, and now I understand why they're so expensive. It's a challenge, it's complicated, and it takes time.
If I could choose what to come back as, it would be a Martin OM45. Now, when Eric Clapton says that about one of your instruments, that means a lot.
What I think is really cool about when a famous musician is playing a Martin guitar is they discovered how cool Martin guitars were on their own. We don't give Martin guitars away. We don't pay people to play Martin guitars.
This guitar here is a 1953 D18 that was owned by Kurt Cobain. He liked the guitar, it was old and beat up. He gave it the nickname Grandpa. Used it for a couple of years. I believe he might have used it on Nirvana's first 2 albums, but then he ended up giving it back to his ex-girlfriend at the time. This is Hank Williams' 1947 D18. People come from all over the world to see this guitar. Recently, a gentleman came from Canada and we let him play it. And as soon as he started playing it, he just started crying because it meant that much to him.
We're doing something here pretty special. We're making the best of its kind.
A lot of companies try to figure out the way we build. And I mean, anybody can come to our factory and take this tour and see how we do it, but there's a tone you can only get from a Martin guitar.
I can't tell you exactly what the secret formula is. Patience, perseverance, trust.
It's just something special about the materials we use and the hand craftsmanship that's passed down from generation to generation.
It's complicated, and that's why, you know, maybe you really need to have been doing it for 186 years to be able to do it as well as we do.
1, 2, 3, go.
So my name is Christina Melville and I'm a Moko Jumbie. I want the world to know that this is something good to do, and for the 12 years I've been doing it with me growing up, I can honestly say this did keep me out of trouble. It started in Africa and then it was brought to the Caribbean, and you see a lot in carnivals basically all over the Caribbean, and now it was brought here to Brooklyn. I did fall many of times, and I mean, I just learned from it so I know what to do next time. It's something good to do for the youth to do. And you basically get to experience new things.
We're holding right here like the beginning of...
Yeah, this was my original drawing that came up with the inspiration for the idea of the story, yeah.
So this is the beginning of Wind.
This is, yeah. It's inspired by my grandmother. She was a single mother after the Korean War, and it's inspired by everything she did to take care of her kids and my dad, feed them, educate them, and eventually sending them all the way to the US for a new life there.
If we all look back far enough, there's somebody in our family history that did what the grandmother did, that really was selfless and just sacrificed so much for the next generation to have a better opportunity or a better life.
Hi, I'm Edwin Chang, and I was the writer and director of Wind.
I'm Jesus Martinez, and I produce Wind.
The short is about a grandmother and boy who are trapped in an endless chasm, living together on rocks that are suspended by the giant winds that surround them. Together they scavenge the debris to try and build a rocket in order to try and escape that hole.
And it's all a metaphor, obviously, for North Korea and your family.
It's a metaphor for Korea, a metaphor for immigration, but more personally it was also inspired by my grandmother. She was a single mother after the Korean War, and it's inspired by everything she did to take care of her kids and my dad, feed them, educate them, and eventually sending them all the way to the US for a new life there.
The story is a risk for the characters who are refugees trying to leave a terrible situation, and for its creators who tell a tale where a happy ending is up in the air.
And particularly, I think we were making this last year where the situation at the border and the refugees that were being held up there, it kind of flared up, and it was just kind of one or two sides of the story that were being told. So for me, it was so important to sort of put a different perspective out there of showing that these decisions are never easy, and they're both full of fear and hope at the same time.
So this was your idea from the very beginning, that this is the setting that you would be in?
Yeah, it was.
When you see something like this, it must have really touched you.
This makes it feel real. This really has consequences, and it's a real place. And we have that opening shot where we see the world for the first time and we get a sense of where they are. And we have, in all our films, we go through several iterations of that process. And so we initially started with very simple models and not real animation, but just getting a sense of the camera moves and where the characters will be. So we start playing with effects a little bit, and we start adding elements to the world, just getting a sense of the debris that will surround them. And we're adding things like the storage containers and rocks. And so it's kind of a broken place, a place of lost opportunity. And this setting just seemed to represent that really well. Then animation gets in, and they start adding in really the character emotion and the facial expressions. And that's really when you start feeling like the characters are real people.
And are they actually modeled after your family? Do they look like your family?
We had images of my grandmother to sort of serve as inspiration, but we didn't want to lock necessarily say it has to be her or anything like that. In some ways the story, while it's inspired by it, it's not a recreation of my family story at the same time. There are lots of elements going into it.
Right. Yeah. You're telling me there was no rocket.
No, there was no rocket. Yeah.
I think the goal was to tell a moving story, and my job as a producer was to make sure that we were telling the story that Edwin wanted to tell, because it's such a personal story. If we all look back far enough, there's somebody in our family history that did what the grandmother did, that really was selfless and just sacrificed so much for the next generation to have a better opportunity or a better life.
My father was especially touched to kind of see a version of his story up on the screen. I think my whole family was able to really see her up there on the screen.
Edwin, you mentioned that your grandmother passed away a couple of years ago and she wasn't obviously able to see this short, but I'm curious what you think she would think of it.
Really the main source of her joy was taking care of her children and making sure that they were thriving. For her to see this and see how her children and her grandchildren have done and are living well, I think that would make her really happy, and then to see this film and see how much they recognize that from her would really make her feel grateful and appreciated.
Haley Plotkin of Austin, Texas is the travel vlogger behind Ready, Set, Jet Set. After years of plane travel, she stayed in-state this year to show a new side of her hometown and the best places to rove in Texas.
Haley, you have been living locally this past year, exploring a big state, Texas, but we'll talk about the adventures that you've had and the places you found, these hidden gems in your state.
I've been trying to go all over and use this time to really explore the state, since I didn't really ever have that much time to do it before as a travel blogger. So I've been going to lots of state parks. I'm based in Austin, so I kind of started more in like the Texas Hill Country, and then I've been branching out more. Like I recently went out to Big Bend out west. I've got a trip planned for May to go up north to Palo Duro Canyon State, the second biggest canyon in the US. So I'm excited to do that. And I've been doing lots of like glamping stays, because I think during the pandemic that's kind of like one of the best ways you can travel since it's really private. So it's been fun.
Well, it's been incredible, and these videos have taken off as people want to discover these spots. What are some of your favorite moments?
One of the first places I stayed was this cool spot here in Austin that's just like a real architectural wonderland. It was probably the first video in this series that went, viral, if you can call a few million on TikTok viral. But it's just this really weird building. It's hard to describe, but it's all like swirly white architecture and stuff. So that wasn't really glamping, but that one was really cool, and it was nice because it was in my own city. And then like when I went out west, I stayed in like a bubble hotel under the stars. So that was really cool. You can look straight up and see the whole Milky Way. And I've stayed in things like yurts out in the Texas Hill Country and other fun glamping spots, retro trailers. There's lots of cool stuff around if you really look.
And how do you think this pandemic has encouraged people? Obviously, it's been staying home, you people going on flights, to kind of rediscover their neighborhoods and their places within driving.
Before, a lot of people didn't ever think to travel locally, because it's like, why would I look in my own backyard when I can fly to the Caribbean or I can fly to Europe? But now they've been forced to kind of rethink that and go like, where can I go in driving distance and do more research and find things they maybe didn't look into before, like state parks. I never really looked at state parks at all before the pandemic. I had been to like one in Texas, and now I'm all about them. You can get a state park pass for your state and go explore all of them. You'd be surprised. Some of the state parks are like at national park level.